You have to build your house on a really strong foundation. It was only when I started to address my own needs and really look at my scenario and say, what's broken here, what needs fixing, and what can I do about it, that things started to change and shift in my life, and I actually started to move towards the life that I wanted to live. All right, hello. Welcome to the Heal Yourself First podcast. So my name is Jon Willems, and I sort of founded and created this community called Heal Yourself First. And really the whole point of it is just because I truly abide by this philosophy that in order to help fix the world, or in order to live the lives that we want to live, you have to do so from a healed place. You have to build your house on a really strong foundation. So I had a very weak foundation growing up. It led me to all sorts of traumatic experiences and all sorts of mental health dilemmas. And it was only when I started to address my own needs and really look at my scenario and say, what's broken here, what needs fixing, and what can I do about it, that things started to change and shift in my life, and I actually started to move towards the life that I wanted to live. And I'm closer to that life than I have ever been. And really, I've accomplished some things that I never thought I would have been capable of doing where I was at from that unhealed place. And so I really do believe that we have this profound ability to do amazing things on this planet. But if we want to do that, then we have to address what's going on in our own universe before we can work with the external universe. So this company is basically founded on those principles of healing yourself first in order to help heal the world. And the way that we do that is through all sorts of different modalities. So whether it be addressing how you breathe, or whether it be addressing how you move through yoga or through exercise, or how your mind functions, whether it be through intelligence like reading and wisdom and understanding philosophy, or whether it be through the actual mechanisms of the mind, such as attention and awareness. So all of these things do play a major influence on our lives. And so learning how to navigate these different things, these different systems that influence our consciousness can really have a profound impact on the lives we live here and how we are able to navigate our own experience. So the more we understand about ourselves, the more we can use ourselves to create beautiful and amazing things. So that's Heal Yourself First. That's a little bit of my story. And this is my podcast, Heal Yourself First. So thank you for joining me. And I'm just going to be talking about all sorts of different things that I've learned on my journey, all sorts of different experiences I've had. And hopefully you can sort of learn from these stories and these teachings and take something away with you that adds value to your life. So really just thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this. And let's get into podcast number 1, Heal Yourself First. All right, so in order to understand some of the different things that I'm going to be talking about, I think it's really important to understand how exactly I came to some of these conclusions. And in order to do that, I think it's important that I share my story and a lot of the relevant pieces of that from very early on in my history. So I was basically born and raised in a small town just outside of London, Ontario. It was a middle-class family. My dad was an electrician. My mom was a manager at a cosmetic store, but also she did some spiritual stuff on the side. So she's a spiritual psychotherapist and does some work with energy healing and stuff like that. So from a little bit of an early age, people would ask me, they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And as opposed to like saying a firefighter, like a police officer, whatever, I would always say I wanted to be a philosopher, or potentially even an author. And so even though maybe for a while I forgot some of these things, it was like sort of a core part of me from the very beginning to want to explore consciousness and to want to understand things on a sort of deeper level. But it wasn't until I had my own sort of mental health issues and severe family-related trauma that I understood the importance of philosophy and of understanding sort of deeper meanings behind what's actually going on the surface level. So what happened was initially my family was very good. Things were okay. Like, we didn't necessarily connect as well as some other families, but we were together, and that was what was important. And things were okay until the moment that they sort of weren't. So what initially happened was my grandfather had passed away. It was sort of sudden and unexpected, and this was my mom's father. And so this came out of the blue, and it happened out of nowhere, and just like that, we lost this big foundational piece to our family structure, and really like the main figure in the hierarchy of the whole family. So after that, we had a carbon monoxide leak that happened in our home that literally almost took the lives of our entire family. It went undiscovered for quite a long period of time, and we didn't know how much it was leaking or how long it had been leaking for. And so they call it the silent killer, because a lot of times families will go to bed and they won't wake up in the morning because there's carbon monoxide leaking all throughout their house. So it was a pretty severe thing. And my dad was sort of a handyman. He was a construction worker, and so he was the one maintaining that furnace himself. And so when he realized that the leak happened under his watch, when he was sort of supposed to be the one taking care of it, the guilt and the shame just sort of overwhelmed him. And all of these sort of old emotional issues that maybe he had been neglecting started to bubble to the surface. And really it was this unbelievable breaking point where he just sort of lost himself within that darkness for a while. So he became severely depressed and anxious, and all sorts of different emotional releases, like crying and just secluding himself and isolating himself to be in that pain. And so at the same time, my mom got a diagnosis that she had a tumor on her spinal cord, basically. And we didn't know if this tumor was cancerous or if it was benign, but sort of the assumption was that it was cancerous and that she only had a couple months to live. She was literally told this by a doctor. And so she basically took every measure she could to try and heal herself and sort of address this deep issue that she had going on in her life. So she just lost her father. Her husband is having a mental breakdown. She has a clinical diagnosis where she's told she has a couple months left to live. And so this leads her to basically make the decision to split from my father. And so my mom and my sister moved away so that she could address her issues. And then I stayed alone with my dad so I could continue to be with my friends. But here I am, a kid who had a pretty good life up until now, which I did have some sort of sexual related trauma when I was younger, and I'm sure I'll tell that story at some point. But not to say that my life was perfect, but things were pretty good. And then within sort of 6-month window, my whole life just falls apart, just like that. And I'm left as a 13-year-old kid with no sort of parental guidance, no sort of direction in life, left to pick up all the broken pieces. And I really didn't know how to do that. So I started high school as this like amazing academic kid who's top of his class and has this bright future of getting a soccer scholarship. And I sort of ended high school failing out of school, being depressed and suicidal and unbelievably anxious to the point that I was having panic attacks. And so basically what happened was at the start of high school, I started to party and I started to explore different sort of pleasure seeking and all these exciting activities to really avoid feeling the pain that I was feeling inside and really escape from the broken world that I had bubbling within me. So I used all these mechanisms to run away from my feelings, run away from my issues, and pretend that they weren't there. So I had this sort of illusion that things were okay in my life and everything was perfect throughout the whole course of high school until I ended up getting arrested for marijuana. So I was driving home one day and the cops pulled us over, and I ended up taking the blame for all the cannabis that we had in the car. And basically all of my dirty laundry got revealed not only to my friends and to my family, but to myself as well. So for the first time I could see that, you know what, I'm not this cool popular kid that everybody wants to be friends with, but in reality I'm failing out of school, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I don't even have the discipline to clean my room, and I'm engaged in all sorts of these really terrible sort of addictive behaviors. And that was like a very serious wake-up call for me. It really showed me who I was and where I was at, and I had to take a really serious look at the condition that I was in. And after this, things got sort of dark for a while. I got arrested, my family found out, and then I had to move away from my dad and move back in with my mom, and this started this sort of grieving period that I partook in. So I ended up being alone in my room, like crying for like 3 to 4 months straight, just in isolation, like 12 hours a day in my room, just crying. But it really showed me that I just had to sort of purge all of these negative emotions that were stored in me. All that pain that I had felt over that many years was just stored inside my body. And I had to go through this deep period of grieving just to like get all this heaviness and this gunk out of my system. And I purged it through crying and through emotional releases. And the more I was able to do that, the lighter things got, and sort of the happier I was becoming and the more energy I had. And that actually gave me enough hope, enough light, or enough positivity to keep that momentum going and to keep changing and moving in the right direction, as opposed to going darker and darker and more off course than I had initially planned or wanted. So I got a little bit more confident, and that got me confident enough that I could actually go and start seeking help. So I found an anxiety counselor, and I had a panic attack right before this, and it was like super severe. And so I realized that I really needed to get more help than what I was able to provide for myself. And so I found an anxiety clinic, and I actually drove myself there, and I actually admitted to the person what was going on in my life. And this was like such a major step for me, because up until that moment, like I hadn't sort of actually accepted it myself. And because of that, I wasn't able to tell anybody else. But through going through this process of finding it myself and actually going there and saying yes to my own healing, that just was the commitment that I needed to really make drastic changes in my life. So from that moment, I started exercising, and I started sort of eating better, and I started taking better care of my body and surrounding myself in healthier environments. And it was like this positive feedback loop of success where things just continued to get better and better over time, the more I engaged with these healthy habits. And it got to the point where eventually I didn't even sort of recognize my old self. And that's not to say that I overcame the depression and the anxiety within a short amount of time. It took a very long periods of time to re-regulate my nervous system, to let go of all those bad habits that I had and start building new good habits, and to really condition the world around me to be healthier, as opposed to me choosing to put myself in bad environments. So it did take quite a long time after I had this sort of moment of awakening until the changes actually started to take effect. And this is the real key with integration, I think, is you have to understand that if we're damaging ourselves for really long periods of time, we can't expect to heal in really short periods of time. It's going to be a process. And the sooner you can accept that there's no magic pill, there's no quick fix that's going to solve all of our problems, then we can actually start realistically going about making our lives better and influencing this world in a positive and beautiful way. So I basically was able to start overcoming a lot of my mental health issues, but I wanted to learn as much of this as I possibly could, because I still saw that there were countless other Canadian citizens and just other people from my generation who were suffering from the same mental health issues that I was having, but they weren't necessarily able to get over them in the same way that I had gotten over them. So I knew that there were these techniques that were available to us that exist out there that can help us address our issues, but maybe those resources aren't as readily available as they should be, or as, people can work to make them more available. So I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to learn as much about this as I can to not only heal myself, but to start sharing it with others. So I figure if you want to learn the best about wellness techniques, then you got to go to the source. So the very first place that I ended up going was I moved to Thailand, and I lived as a Buddhist monk for a little while, and I learned from them how to meditate, and I learned from them basically like their all sorts of practices that they have just to reflect on who you are and how you are as a person, and use some tools to actually influence how you interact with the world so that you can interact with the world in a better way. So they use cleanliness, they use community, they use reflection and meditation, They use like healthy eating habits and stuff like that. So just diving headfirst into this community of all these amazing people holding each other accountable to work on themselves, and it absolutely transformed and changed my life. And that was really like the first big step for me of learning how to actually become a healed version of yourself. But there were still some things there that I didn't get to explore as fully as I might have liked to. And so I started to explore yoga after I left the monastery, and I became a certified yoga teacher. And they started teaching me about the breath and how pranayama actually influences your energy systems and the chakra system, and how basically you could say that we have these energetic organs in our body that function like our physical organs, and those need maintenance and care too. And so I started learning about yoga and the actual physical postures, and they have some different diets and stuff like that, and all sorts of different beliefs that are equally as amazing in Buddhism and in different ways. So I got to go explore that, and then I actually came back and I had some plant medicine journeys in my past that had sort of awoken parts of my consciousness that maybe I had never seen or tapped into before. So I wanted to explore plant medicines a little bit further as well. So I ended up sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony, and that just really reconnected me with my heart and opened up this expansion of love within my life. And so I wanted to explore that further. So I actually went down to Peru and studied with some shamans down there. And they taught me all about medicine work and basically how we interact with spirits and how we are sort of components of nature and how healing nature can be. And so all of these different pieces from all of these different communities really have given me like more of a complete picture of reality and how we fit into this reality as multidimensional beings. And also provided me with like practical tools that can be used in order to make your life better and help you heal from certain things. So like, let's say, for example, you're dealing with self-doubt. Well, something that you could do is you could do self-doubt meditations where every time a recurring thought comes up of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, you reframe that thought through awareness and you shift your attention to a more positive thing through meditation, and you can completely rewire that whole sort of cyclical pattern that is keeping you chained down and keeping you in one box that maybe you've outgrown. So that's just one way that these things can help. Let's say you're suffering from inflammation. Well, a really good thing is to ground and connect to the electromagnetic frequency of the earth, and that can start pulling contamination out of you and start pulling the heat out of you and effectively regulate your system. Like, let's say you're dealing with some physical pain. Well, maybe yoga, and there's some certain yoga postures that can help balance out your muscles and help relieve a lot of that pain that you're going through. So having the good fortune to study from all these different traditions and my commitment to going and learning from these has really helped my life in profound ways, so that now I can start sharing some of these insights with other people, which is what I've always wanted to do all along. And that's what this podcast is going to be. I would really love to start sort of encouraging people to just be curious and open-minded to different ways of looking at the world and different ideas and different ideologies about how we can interact with the world, not only as an individual, but as a culture and as a society. So that's a little bit about my story. Hopefully that answers all that you'd like to know about my past, and I'm sure I will reflect on this and maybe share some more in different ways in the future. But I just wanted to give you a sense of sort of who I am, the things that I've learned, and why I feel like sharing these things, and how I'm going to go about actually sharing them in the future. So I do in-person events where I sort of walk people through experiential activities to actually experience a lot of these teachings and these techniques yourself. I will be moving more into the online world and start teaching online as well. And also I do like one-on-one coaching and counseling. So if you're interested and you have any questions about this stuff, continue to watch, or you can reach out to me for more personal curated plans to help you get onto a wellness plan that can really sort of, let's say, enhance your life in a beautiful way. So that's my story. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next video.